Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Comparatives and Superlatives for Adjectives and Adverbs. Let's talk about comparative adjectives first. So, what is a comparative adjective? Well, we use comparative adjectives to compare two things or two people. For instance, he is taller than his sister. Do you see? In this example, we are comparing two people. He, whoever he may be, and his sister. And he is taller than her. And pay attention to the structure of this sentence. We have he, which is the subject. He happens to be a noun. It's a pronoun here, but it's a noun. And then is taller than his sister. Okay, do you see that? We have the subject, verb, then we have the comparative. This is taller in this case. And then we have then. Okay? And then we have the object or the thing that the person or thing is being compared to. So just remember that structure and you will be fine. Now, on the other hand, superlative adjectives are used to show the difference between more than two things or more than two people in a group. For example, Paris is the biggest city in France. So, in this case, we're comparing Paris, right, to all the cities in France. Okay, so let's say that's the group. So we're saying that Paris is the biggest. And when we use that EST, we always use the in front of it. So the biggest. Okay, do you see that? And that's the structure. Okay, we have our subject, and then we have is, and then we have the, whatever that superlative is, with the EST, and then we have what we're actually comparing it to. And that's all the cities in France. Okay, you got it? Now, what's very important about forming comparative adjectives and superlative adjectives is that you need to know the number of syllables in the adjective. Now, a syllable is like a beat. It's like a sound beat. You can even clap your hands when you're saying the word. For instance, the word work contains one syllable, like this, work. But the word working contains two, like this, working. Do you see? So we have one syllable and two syllables. All right, this is very important. So let's see, most of the time, one syllable adjectives form the comparative by adding ER and the superlative adjective by adding EST. Let's take a look at this. So the adjective tall, all right, the comparative is taller. The superlative is tallest. All right, this is a one syllable, right? Tall, I'll clap, tall. Now let's see how they're used in the sentences. So first we have John is tall. That's just the adjective. Then we have the comparative. He is taller than Mark. So we are comparing John to Mark. And then we have he is the tallest student in his class. Then we have John being compared to the group, right? The students in his class. Got it? Okay, now with one syllable adjectives ending with an E, just add R for the comparative form and ST for the superlative form. So let's take a look again. So we have our adjective is large, it ends with E. Our comparative is larger, right? Just add the R. And the superlative is largest. We just add the ST to it. And I'm going to tell you a fish story to help you. Okay? The first fish that I caught today was large. That's the adjective, right? It was larger than the second fish that I caught today. All right, now we're comparing the first fish to the second fish that I caught today. And then we have our superlative. It was the largest fish that I caught all day today. So we are comparing that first fish to the rest of the fish that I caught in that day, that group. All right, and then we use our superlative. Got it? Now, with one-syllable adjectives ending with a single consonant with a vowel before it, you just double the consonant and add ER for the comparative form, and double the consonant and add EST for the superlative form. All right, so we have our adjective, which is big, right? It ends with a consonant, but there's a vowel before it. It's I. So when we make our comparative, we just add another consonant. So it's big, bigger. And we do the same thing with our superlative. We add the consonant and we get biggest. All right, let's look at the example sentences. This gift box is big. This is bigger than the black one. We're comparing the two boxes, right? And then we have this is the biggest in all of the gift boxes. So we're making our superlative, but it's comparing the box to all of the gift boxes. So it's the group of gift boxes. Okay, you got it? All right, for two-syllable adjectives, you form the comparative with more, and you form the superlative with most. So our adjective is skillful, right? That's two syllables, right? Skillful. The comparative, we just add more skillful. And to create our superlative, we use most skillful. So in our example sentences, we have Lucas is a skillful skateboarder. All right, he is more skillful than Lyle, right? We're comparing Lucas to Lyle. And then we say, for our superlative, we have he is the most skillful skater on his team. So we are comparing him to all of the skaters on his team or in the group. Okay, and that's the superlative. Got it? Also, for participle adjectives, you form the comparative with more and the superlative with most. Now, a participle adjective is an adjective that looks like a verb because it usually ends in ed or ing. These endings usually are found on verbs and they're called participles. So that's where the name comes from. So let's look at some participle adjectives now. We're going to look at tired and interesting. So you can see how the comparative for tired is more tired. The comparative for interesting is more interesting. The superlative for tired is most tired, and the superlative for interesting is most interesting. Now let's look at the example sentences. First we have Harold was tired after the race. He was more tired than Steve. This is comparing Harold to Steve. Out of all of the other racers, Harold was the most tired. Now, Harold is being compared to all the other racers in the race, and that's the superlative. With interesting, we have the movie that I saw last night was interesting. It was more interesting than the movie that I saw last week. So we're comparing the movie I saw last night to the movie that I saw last week. And then we have, it was the most interesting movie that I saw this month. So now we're comparing the movie that I saw last night to all the movies that I saw this month. All right, for two-syllable adjectives ending in Y, just change the Y to I and add ER for the comparative form. And for the superlative form, just change the Y to I and add EST. So first we have the adjective busy. The comparative is busier. The superlative is busiest. And let's read the examples now. Manhattan is a busy place. It is definitely busier than Philadelphia. So we're comparing Manhattan to Philadelphia. And then we have, it is probably the busiest place in the United States. So now we're comparing Manhattan to every other place in the United States as a group. All right, and that's why we use the superlative. Okay, for two-syllable adjectives ending in ER, LE, or OW, just add ER to form the comparative and EST to form the superlative forms. All right, so we have the adjective shallow, which ends in OW. The comparative is shallower, and the superlative is shallowest. All right, and let's look at our examples. So we have Lake George is a shallow lake. Shallow means it's not deep. It is shallower than Lake Erie. Okay, it's comparing Lake George to Lake Erie. And then we have Lake George is the shallowest lake in New York State. And this is comparing Lake George to all the other lakes in New York State, meaning the group of lakes. Okay, and that's why we use the superlative. Okay, now we're going to talk about adjectives with 3 syllables or more. And for these adjectives, you form the comparative with more, and you form the superlative with most. So here's a good adjective for you, delicious. How many syllables are in that? Delicious. 3 syllables, right? The comparative is more delicious, and the superlative is most delicious. Now let's look at the examples. My mom's homemade bread is delicious. It is more delicious than my Aunt Amy's homemade bread. So we're comparing my mom's homemade bread to my Aunt Amy's homemade bread. And it is the most delicious bread I've ever had in my entire life. Now we're comparing it to all the bread I've ever eaten in my whole life, that whole group of bread. And that's why we use the superlative. Okay? Now let's talk about adverbs. Now the rules for forming comparative adverbs and superlative adverbs are the same as they are for adjectives. Let's take the adverb hard. The comparative is harder, and the superlative is hardest. This is those one-syllable words, remember? So in our example sentences, Sam works hard in school. She works harder than Mike, comparing how hard she works to Mike. And she works the hardest among her classmates. All right, and then we're comparing how hard she works compared to all of her classmates, the group of classmates. Okay? And here is an example of an adverb with more than one syllable. Let's call it the ly adverb because it's very, very common when we think about adverbs. So in this case, we're going to use the adverb effectively. The comparative is more effectively, and the superlative is most effectively. And let's look at the example sentences next. The new medicine worked effectively. Okay, it's how it worked. How did it work? It worked effectively. It worked more effectively than the old medicine. We're comparing the new medicine to the old medicine. And then It worked the most effectively out of all of the other medicines. Now we're comparing it to all of the other medicines in a group, and that's why we use the superlative. All right, let's move on to the exceptions. And these are the irregular adjectives. For example, we have good, many, little, and late. And the comparatives, let's see, for good, we have better. Superlative is best. Many, comparative is more, with the superlative being most. Little, the comparative is less. The superlative is least. And then we have late, with the comparative being later, and the superlative either being latest or last. Okay, these are very common. There's a few more, but these are the ones that you'll probably see the most. And let's just look at an example of good as an adjective. All right, so Mary is a good athlete. She is a better athlete than Sarah. We're comparing Mary to Sarah. And then she is the best athlete on her team. She is the best. We're comparing her to everyone else on the team. And that's the group. Okay, and that's the best for the superlative. And for the irregular adverbs, these are also exceptions. We have badly, well, and little. The comparative for badly is worse. The superlative is worst. Well, the comparative is better, and the superlative is best. And we have little. The comparative is less, and the superlative is least. Again, these are the common ones. There are more out there. So let's take a look at the examples. That store treats their customers badly. They treat their customers worse than some other stores. Now we're comparing that store to other stores. All right? And then we have, out of all of the stores in our city, that store treats their customers the worst. And that's in a group, the stores in the city. Okay? And that's why we use the superlative. And the last exception I'm going to talk about are adjectives that can be used with ER for the comparative or more. And you could use EST or most for the superlative. So, for example, the adjective quiet. Let's also look at common, and let's look at pleasant. The comparative can be either quieter or more quiet. And for common, it can be commoner or more common. And for pleasant, it is pleasanter or more pleasant. And the superlative can be either quietest or most quiet. And for common, commonest or most common. And for pleasant, it's pleasantest or most pleasant. The first example sentence we're going to look at, Mark is a quiet student. Okay, that's the same. He is quieter than Judy, or he is more quiet than Judy, comparing him to Judy. And he is the quietest student in the class, or we can say he is the most quiet student in the class. Okay, you got it? Just remember, these are just 3 examples of many of these exceptions. All right, I just used these just to give you an idea of the exceptions, okay? But there are many that are similar to this. All right, and you'll learn them as you learn more English. All right? Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks a lot for watching and for subscribing. Remember what I always say, keep practicing. See you next time.